If the jury returns a guilty verdict, I want to see him locked away for a very, very long time. I honestly believe that would give a lot of women in this town peace of mind, just knowing he isn't roaming the streets or finding ways into our houses. I hope the consequences are severe. I really think a harsh sentence will, send a powerful message. It draws a line in the sand regarding what our community tolerates. Clearly, there is something psychologically broken within him. My gut tells me he was on a trajectory to become a serial killer if he hadn't been stopped, simply because his violence was escalating with every attack. Is greater than. The date was January 20th, 2008. It was a freezing, silent morning in Reno, Nevada. Around 4 a.m., grainy footage from a neighbor's security camera caught a ghostly figure creeping through the darkness near the University of Nevada, Reno. Nobody realized at that moment that, within minutes, a young woman would vanish and the entire city would be gripped by terror. Her name was Brianna Dennison. Before she became the face of a national tragedy, Brianna was just living her life as a vibrant 19-year-old undergrad. A Reno native, she came from a tight-knit family and was adored for her genuine spirit, radiant energy, and a wisdom that seemed well beyond her years. Those who knew her best described her as grounded and incredibly supportive. She was actually enrolled at Santa Barbara City College at the time, but had flown back to Nevada during winter recess to bond with family and reconnect with her hometown crew. The days leading up to the nightmare were totally routine, filled with laughter, hanging out, and looking forward to the new year. On the night of January 19th, 2008, Brianna went out with her inner circle near the University District. They hit up a local house party, shared stories, and soaked up the kind of easygoing evening that usually ends with a safe ride home. Around 4 a.m., after catching a lift, Brianna decided to crash at a friend's place on McKay Court, right across from campus. It was a familiar safe house, full of friends. Wiped out from the festivities, she curled up to sleep on a sofa in the main living area. But the sliding glass door nearby, a small oversight nobody caught, had been left unlocked. It was a quiet street. Nobody inside imagined that a monster was already prowling just feet away. In the months leading up to this, the area around the university had been plagued by reports of young women being targeted after dark. There was a creeping sense of paranoia, a feeling that someone was watching their everyday moves. Detectives were already tracking a serial predator linked to sexual assaults, but the investigation had hit a wall. Then, on that freezing January morning, the predator made his move. Before the sun came up, an intruder slipped through that sliding door, silent, methodical, and terrifyingly bold. He crept toward the unsuspecting girl on the couch. The abduction was swift and brutal. He snatched Brianna from the living room without generating enough noise to rouse the house. When the sun finally rose, the other roommates were completely oblivious to the fact that she was gone. A friend walked into the room hours later to find an empty sofa. The initial thought was that she'd just gone for a walk or headed home, but as they scanned the room, dread set in. Brianna's purse was sitting there, her cell phone, her clothes, all her essentials were left behind. The only thing missing was her bedding, until they spotted the blanket, tossed in the yard, snagged on a shrub. That's when the panic hit. The family was alerted. 911 was dialed. Confusion turned to sheer terror instantly. Brianna wasn't the type to ghost her friends or leave without a word. By mid-morning, a missing person report was active, launching one of the biggest manhunts in Reno history. Police taped off the residence on McKay Court, treating it as a primary crime scene. CSI units started, sweeping the common area and the point of entry. They hunted for fibers, prints, or biological evidence. Outside, canine units scoured the perimeter, while volunteers flooded the streets with flyers. Local TV stations blasted her image across the valley. But initially, the trail was agonizingly empty. However, within the first 24 hours, techs found a smoking gun, a tiny speck of blood on the pillow Brianna had used. It wasn't hers. Lab results confirmed it came from an unknown male, and to their horror, the profile matched the DNA found on 2 previous rape victims in the University District. 3 violent crimes were now officially the work of a single serial offender. The stakes skyrocketed. The hunt for Brianna went into overdrive. Investigators pulled hours of security tape from surrounding businesses, grilled everyone who was at the party, and chased down every lead. Search and rescue choppers flew low, Teams combed through vacant properties, riverbanks, and the desert outskirts. The entire city held its breath. Time dragged on, turning days into agonizing weeks. Her family stood before the cameras, begging for her life, while neighbors gathered under the glow of candlelight vigils to pray. An army of volunteers scoured the area, refusing to give up. Yet, despite the city's fierce resolve, Brianna was nowhere to be found. Then came February 15th, 2008. Nearly 4 weeks after she vanished, the break came, and it was grim. A passerby wandering near a lonely, trash-strewn lot in southeast Reno spotted something unusual hidden beneath a pile of brush. It was the lifeless form of a young woman. Police swarmed the scene, but the hope that had fueled the search was extinguished in an instant. It was her. It was Brianna Dennison. She had been violated and taken. The medical examiner found unmistakable evidence of strangulation. The sheer viciousness of the act left even the most hardened detectives shaken to their core. But her body told a story. Genetic material recovered during the autopsy was a direct hit to the same unknown male connected to the previous attacks. The predator had slipped up, leaving a biological trail. Yet he remained a ghost. No name, no face, and zero motive, just a genetic code. While her family faced their darkest hour, investigators meticulously reconstructed the clock, second by second. Every step she took, every face she saw, and the exact method the intruder used to slip inside everything was scrutinized. One terrifying truth hung over them. Brianna's killer was free, walking the streets, and this wasn't his first time striking. It triggered one of the most massive manhunts in the history of the state, a relentless pursuit to unmask a monster living right among them. Finding Brianna's remains shifted the entire operation. It was no longer a rescue mission. It was a full-blown hunt for a murderer. Authorities doubled down, obsessed with identifying the source of that genetic marker now linked to 3 brutal assaults and a killing. The heat was on. The community was terrified and demanding answers, while the families of earlier victims prayed this would finally be the end of their torment. The team started by walking back through Brianna's last known moments. Anyone who crossed paths with her in those final hours was brought in for questioning. Friends broke down the timeline, the party, the laughter, and her choice to crash on the couch after a totally normal night. Forensics scoured the entry points, focusing on that sliding glass door, checking the backyard and soil for impressions. But the elements in the passing weeks had washed away the physical clues. However, everything rested on their ace in the hole, the biology. That unknown male profile was pristine and undeniable. They ran it against every criminal file in the state system. They cast a wider net, hitting the national databases, scrubbing lists of recent military veterans, and digging into guys with even low-level rap sheets. Nothing. 0 hits. This guy was a phantom, either never caught for a major crime or somehow never swabbed. Running out of options, detectives pivoted back to the previous attacks connected by the same genetic signature. They sat down with the survivors again, dissecting the modus operandi, looking for the devil in the details. Every incident clustered near the campus, always in the dead of night or the pre-dawn hours. Survivors described a shadowy figure who knew exactly what he was doing, strong, sure of himself. These weren't random acts. They were calculated, methodical, and getting worse. Not just opportunistic violence. This was a hunter refining his craft. While the task force worked the profile, the tip line started ringing. Then came the call that broke the case wide open. A woman reached out, terrified, claiming her boyfriend, James Michael Bella, was acting strange, paranoid, that the cops were after him. Even creepier, she said he'd handed her a pair of women's panties, a bizarre red flag that made investigators sit up straight. She told them James wanted her to keep them for him, a request that weirded her out but didn't click as criminal until now. Once the lab ran tests on the people garment, the science didn't lie. The genetic material on that fabric was a perfect match to Brianna's killer. With that smoking gun, they dug into Bella's life. 27 years old, construction guy, ex-Marine, a dad. He was a local, knew the campus streets like the back of his hand. And there was a dark side, a paper trail of abuse involving his girlfriend, full of domination and rage. The puzzle was finally complete. Armed with a warrant, detectives tracked him down at his job site. He played it cool, but the sweat on his brow gave him away. They swabbed him, and when the lab came back, the numbers didn't lie. It was him. The code from Brianna? the other attacks, and Bella were one and the same. On November 25th, 2008, agonizing months since she vanished, police slapped handcuffs on James Michael Bella, charged with kidnapping, assault, and murder. He sat in that interrogation room and stonewalled. He swore he had nothing to do with it, claims he had no ties to Brianna, denied the earlier assaults, and acted like he had nothing to hide. But detectives hammered him with the biological proof. Yet his face remained a blank slate, offering only mumbled evasions and stories that didn't stick. When they asked about the undergarments found in his partner's stash, he clammed up. But his silence didn't stop the avalanche of facts coming his way. The prosecution wasted no time assembling a bulletproof dossier, stacking up genetic reports, eyewitness accounts, minute-by-minute schedules, crime maps, call logs, and psychological profiles. Specialists explained that the odds of a random genetic match were basically non-existent. The connection to the prior attacks revealed a terrifying escalation, a predator graduating from assault to cold-blooded murder. As the court date neared, the city braced for a trial heavy with heartbreak. Brianna's relatives, standing shoulder to shoulder with women who survived his earlier attacks, packed the gallery. The room hummed with their grief, but also their iron will. Proceedings kicked off in May 2010. The state presented a narrative that was methodical, precise, and absolutely chilling. A stalker hunting in the college district, a predator whose violence ramped up, a shadow slipping into homes while victims slept, a monster who left his genetic code at every scene, a killer who snuffed out the life of a bright 19-year-old. The defense tried to claim the samples were tainted, and the rest was just coincidence. But with every person who took the stand, that story fell apart. The science was undeniable. When the survivors spoke, their words hit hard, and Bella's own movements that night placed him exactly where the abduction happened. There was no way out. After weeks of testimony, the jury needed less than 24 hours. The decision came back unanimous, guilty on every charge. On August 10, 2010, the gavel came down for the kidnapping, rape, and slaying of Brianna, alongside the other attacks. James Michael Bella was condemned to death, with 4 life terms added on top to ensure he'd never breathe free air again. He was shipped off to Ely State Prison to wait for the end. But for Brianna's loved ones, the conviction was legal closure, not a cure for their pain. The void in their lives was massive. Still, they refused to let the darkness win. They channeled their agony into action, launching the Brianna Dennison Foundation, fighting for safer campuses and demanding that rape kits get tested immediately, not left on a shelf. Their crusade helped pass laws that cleared the forensic backlog, making sure other monsters wouldn't slip through the cracks. This tragedy left a scar on Nevada. It exposed just how open campuses were to danger, proved a fatal cost of ignoring evidence, and taught us that wolves often hide in sheep's clothing right next door. Most of all, it showed how quickly a life can be snatched away and the devastating heartbreak of a family, missing a daughter, a sister, and a friend. But this isn't just a file in a police archive. It's a stark warning to stay alert, look out for your neighbors, and never stop fighting for the truth. Her spirit drives real change today, ensuring her legacy protects others even though she's gone.